G'day everyone, just a few quick insights into this week's episode with Paul Docherty, Executive Chair of BRC Capital. Paul built and scaled a business from 2004 through to 2014, which ultimately exited in 2014 for $650 million as part of a larger group. Pretty big outcome. And after that, since 2017, he's founded about 6 or 7 other companies. He's got an incubator that seeds capital and helps these businesses grow, a completely different industry, but really amazing businesses that are growing, and was able to take all of his learnings from 10 years worth of scaling in business and concentrate it down and really apply that into a completely new business model. And I think you're going to love hearing that transformation of learnings from one journey installed into the second journey. So if you're looking for some really interesting insights today, make sure you listen all the way to the end as he talks about the incubator and that business model and how he installed those learnings. I think you really enjoyed today's episode. Get amongst it.
Welcome to the ScaleUps podcast, where each week you get to hear Sean Steele, professional CEO, growth mentor and advisory board chair, unpack the strategies that successful founders have used to achieve scale in their businesses. Stay tuned as he interviews the entrepreneurs who've made it, learns from industry experts, and follows a group of founders still striving to scale.
G'day everyone, and welcome to the ScaleUps podcast, where we help first-time founders learn the secrets of scaling so they can fulfill the potential of their businesses, make bigger decisions with greater confidence, and maximize the impact they can have in the world. I am joined today by my guest, Paul Docherty, Executive Chair of BRC Capital. I've got a lot of things to say about you, Paul. Executive Chair of BRC Capital, a leading pre-revenue incubator, which we're going to be talking about later on. You founded Smile Styler, Circle, Hummingbird Health, Hood.ai at BRC Capital and 3D Meditech. And this is all after completing a major scale up and exit of a business called Direct Connect originally between 2006, I believe, and then 2014 when you made your exit was later part of Lumo Energy. And that was sold to Snowy Hydro for $650 million in 2014. And in addition to that, you're also the regional chair for ANZ for YPO. Many people will have heard of YPO on this podcast before, the largest CEO network in the world. And I'm probably missing out 12 or 13 other things.
It all sounds a bit daunting. You probably missed my last day job, which is chair of the Melbourne Rebels, which takes up a hell of a lot of my time as well, Sean. So, but the rest of it's accurate. Yes, you've done well.
Jeez,
done
mate.
well.
Very good. Well, welcome to the podcast, mate. How are you today? Are you good?
Very well, Sean. Very well. I had a lovely day at the Grand Prix yesterday. So
yes.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
We were sharing first world problems. I'd just come back from a week's holiday in the most sort of glorious Sunshine Coast, actually 5 hours north of Sunshine Coast in the surf with my boys every day, and yeah, it was pretty tough.
Fantastic.
Feeling very blessed, mate. We were introduced by Pete Cleary. For those who don't know Pete Cleary, he was in episode 24. Amazing story of scale through international expansion and some really clever adaptation through the COVID period, and a wonderful human.
He's a great human being, Pete.
And he thought you might know a thing or two about scaling businesses. So one of the things that we were chatting about offline, what I want to make sure we come back to is, this incubator that you've set up, which is, seeding a whole bunch of startups. You are able to capture the learnings that you've taken from a much longer period, but built to a very sizable business through Direct Connect, and apply it and see what you could, how you could accelerate, how you can avoid, pain, accelerate trajectory. So I want to make sure that we unpack that. But I'd love to start today on Direct Connect, if we can. Can you give us maybe a bit of an overview of the Direct Connect business model? What did it do, and when and how did it start?
Yeah, so 2004 actually was when we started the business, Sean. Direct Connect was really, it's a utility aggregator, helps people move home. So when you move home, we organise your electricity, your telephone, in those days your landline,
we seem to still have those on the phone bill.
I don't know why we do. I don't know. Yeah. I was, but we were internet insurance, your home removalist. But primarily, we were a big channel to market for energy and telco.
Right.
And we started that business in 2004. I started that business in 2004, and I started it because I'd had 6 years overseas. I come back, and I rented my first place back in Melbourne. and I used a competitor's service, and it was all happened to be fax based. People still use those too, Sean, believe it or not. It was all fax based, and they just didn't get any of my details right. I thought this is a really cool service, but they just didn't get any of my details right. I thought there's got to be a better way to do that. So spring forward 3 months, spoke to a mate who was setting up an energy business, and I said to him, look, I think this is a great channel to market, and I said, I think we can do it better. So he gave me 50 grand, said, you've got 3 months, do your best. And so I sat in a corner, and we developed basically an online application form which came straight through to us. It reduced all of the double handling, reduced any of the issues with faxes falling down and data entry, and that was the extent of our innovation. And you know, it really sort of started to change the market, which we know today as the utility aggregation market, or the moving home aggregators, or whichever three-letter acronym you want to use. But you know, the UCS market, or the MHA market, is a big channel to market for the energy and telco world, and is really a convenience-based service. So we built that business over 10 years. It was a lot of fun.
Mate, I remember it just made me laugh when you were talking about the stuff coming through by the fax. You know, the number of businesses, I'm sure, if you go back 15 years, the number of businesses that we were all involved in that had, a bunch of people, taking information over a phone, putting it down on a piece of paper, handing it to somebody else, who'd retype it in another system, it'd go through that system, and then you didn't have an integration between that one and the next one. So somebody else would print that out, type it into the next one. You'd get all these errors all the way along the chain. It was
That's right. And that was it. And one of the weirdest things about when we sold the business, I never forget sitting in the in the meetings where we're talking about how innovative we'd become. And they said, oh, so what's the percentage? How did it all move? You're obviously 100% now. And we said, no, we've still got 17% of our real estate agents fax us our clients' information. So in 10 years, we'd made some progress, but not to where we wanted to be. But yeah, it was just one of those things. Well, people get in those habits, and they're often very hard to break.
I haven't done much business in Japan, but I understand there's still a lot of faxing going on, and a lot of people are hanging on to it dearly. So at some point it might disappear. You never know. So talk to me a bit about the evolution of this journey. You basically went from sort of starting in 2004 over 10 years to a $650 million business. How did the business model change, or was it really sort of sales and marketing acceleration and just scale of the same model?
Yeah. Well, the 650 was really the value. The value was in the Lumo Energy, where the customers, of which there were 500,000 of those, were a very valuable commodity, wholesale contracts, all of the various bits and pieces that went with it. But like any of those companies with sort of large scale customer bases that have a tendency to churn, and the energy market in those days churned at about 30% of your portfolio, right? So you had to replace
every year. You're losing 30% of your customers to someone else.
Yeah, that's right. It was a highly competitive market. And so to have a channel like ours, which used to pump through a couple of 100,000, you'd get them. They were really simple customer transactions. The quality of information that you got was high. The way that we operated was very different from other channels, any door knocking or telephony or other things. That was the big difference. And so those two things combined made a really nice asset. And when we think about where that asset should have been, if you were PwC and you came along and you said, well, we want to value those two assets together, I mean, there was a lot of work that went on prior to that. Might have been it would have been valued at significantly lower, maybe a third less than if you don't have those two assets clubbed together. And that was the I guess the swing in the upside of it. So if I took the the Direct Connect asset in its own right, it had about sort of 40 or 45 million bucks of revenue. You might have valued it sort of in the $70 to $80 million region, and the rest was the customer value of an energy customer, but combined, that was really where the value was.
And did it end up being valued on an earnings multiple?
There were a whole range of different things. No, basically you had a customer price, and it had all sorts of things in there, which included your wholesale contracts, your cash, your whether you had generation, and in the instance of Lumo Energy, there was some generation in there. So not easy to find that bit right, but there was a lot of kind of moving parts in it. But that combination of generation, really good wholesale contracts, a big customer base, and then us, who was able to feed that customer base, that was the total value.
Yeah, okay, made the pie much sweeter. And was the original intent when you started Direct Connect to sell it? Did Lumo buy it 100% of the business, or how did that sort of transaction happen?
No, so we had a common owner in a business in a company called Infratil, who were a great infrastructure and investment company, still are a listed entity, still are today, run by a business called Morrison & Co. And Morrison & Co. had taken a stake in Direct Connect and in Victoria Electricity, which was the business that turned into the Lumo Energy business, and so that common ownership pulled both of those businesses together and took that through. So, I spent a lot of time saying, when's the best time to exit? And I think we got to about 2012, and I think Infratil said, right, we're going to go large, let's put them together and go. And I think that was really where the excitement began, because we started to have to prepare for what does that exit actually look like, and how do we actually do that. So and we had, as you always do in the startup world, leaving the electricity business aside, we had a hell of a time in terms of Direct Connect and how we actually grew that business. It was fascinating.
Well, let's talk about that, mate. So I'm interested, if you think back, there's a lot that happens over a 10-year journey to build a $45 million revenue business, right? When you reflect on that journey, what are some of the key moments or the key decisions or investments that you feel like really sort of changed the inflection or the scalability or the trajectory of that business?
Yeah, I said probably two moments. I think when we got to 2007, we got this opportunity in the market where we became a sort of a third tier player. There were three tiers. There was another significant business called Utility One. Then there was Connect Now, which is still in the market today, owned by AGL. And then there was us. And that sort of tiering was where the market sat. And in 2007, we said, okay, we can stand still today. We might have been, 30 or 40,000 customers, Sean, and then we had said, look, we either need to exponentially grow or find something else to do with the business. And that inflection point was when the chairman of the business, the guy called Bruce Harker, he said, look, we were making really good progress. We'd stabilized our systems. We had a really good product to market. Our service was fantastic, and we had the capacity to grow quickly. And he just never forget him saying, look, it's going to cost us a bit more, but let's eat as much of this market as we can now, and let's take a much stronger position. So, within the space of 12 months, we had gone from 3 to 1. And we had done that by understanding that the market was shifting a little bit, that the owners were losing interest certainly in the number one player at that time. They were having some moves and changes within their own business and business shareholding, and we said, right, now's the time to pounce, and we went quickly. So we didn't even think about the number two player. In fact, we instructed our people, don't bother there. These guys they're pretty good. They know what they're doing. These other guys, there's a bit of turmoil there, and we went really hard. And within 12 months, we'd taken the number one spot. Probably one of the inflection points. And I'd say the other inflection point was literally...
Sorry, Paul, if you think about what did you have to put in place to get to number one? Like, what was the sort of investment or the strategy to go, okay, well, we're going to have to go super hard here. What did that look like?
Yeah, so look, we went from 10 people on the road to 30 people on the road. Mm-hmm. Within 3 months, we We had a system that we had designed that allowed us to aggressively grow. We knew that the agent groups that were out there, the real estate agent groups who sent us clients' information, they were ready for change. It was really a long list of things that we said the market's ready and we need to go. And then you've got to have the capital to do that.
Yes.
And the beauty was you had Infratil sitting there saying, let's get aggressive about this. Let's use that capital. And there was less focus on the P&L and a lot more focus on what we were doing from a growth side. So those two things, we said, we'll balance them up over the next 2 or 3 year period. Let's take the market while we've got that opportunity, because the growth, if you think about, we're going from 3 to 1, and that was going from, call it 800 real estate agents on our books to about 4,500, right? So the shift is exponential.
Yeah.
And so to do that, you've got to spend. But we knew that to do that spending over the period where we could add up all of those key market factors was actually going to be a lot cheaper than if we did that, and we bled through that period over 4 or 5 years. We knew it was going to be more expensive over time.
Right.
So we said, let's take the big gulp now. Let's go really hard. Let's be aggressive, and then let's sort out the P&L when we get through that point. So we came out the side of that. 2008 wasn't a great time for markets, and 2009 came, and we said, okay, let's right-size this. So, we literally sort of the second sort of inflection point was we've got really good systems. I'll never forget one of the board members came and said to me, look, we're going to do this across the board. We want to see you cut 30% out of your OPEX. And that was, we were a people-driven business. And probably if I think about hard moments, we had the market, we had the growth, and now they were saying to us, you need to lean up now. And part of that was because the market had shifted and changed. And 2008 was traumatic for a lot of, particularly those market-based funds. It was pretty traumatic, right? So everything was really about cost-cutting, making sure you were lean and mean. And from our perspective, we went through that process. It was really painful, but taught us a great lesson about, for me, it taught me a great lesson about, markets in time. So taking a moment in time and making that moment your own, and then realizing out the other side there are always consequences. So if we'd taken a brick by brick and build it approach, we probably would have had less trauma in relation to what happened in 2009 when we had to right size the business.
Yeah.
But because we'd gone so aggressively, that trauma was significantly more than it would have been if we'd just, we'd built up and we'd been 1,500 agents and we'd had, 12 or 13 or 14 people on the road. So we took a punt, and we went hard, and we really owned the market from there. I mean, that was, from then on, it was really hard to shake us. And what that allowed us to do was have different conversations with our energy partners, our telco partners, our insurance partners, because we had scale.
Yeah.
And that was fundamentally the difference. We had gone from 30 or 40,000 up to, close to 200,000, in a very short space of time. I'm having a very different conversation with the AGLs and the Origins and the EAs and the people that we were providing customers to in relation to the revenue that I could generate. It's made a big difference.
That's so fascinating. And you had a, I think it's not lost on me that you had a parent company there that was ready to deploy capital and could see, even though you were going to have to go hard and sacrifice earnings along the way, but you had confidence that you could sort it out later. They had to be able to see that future and, with clarity to go, okay, well, that's a bet worth taking. But I love, I was just thinking about, pretty recently we had Mark Maley, who you would know from Queensland YPO chapter. And a really interesting part of his story was that their big moment was also a competitor that was a bit distracted, had just done a merger. It was looking like it was going to go pretty badly. There was going to be a whole bunch of people they thought they could sort of go and grab to build into the business. And they did, and they took that opportunity, and he had to really double down like you did and go, this is going to take some really big kahunas. And actually, guys, you need to get on the bus. We're going to have to go ultra hard. But if we do so, the opportunity is massive. And so I think there's a real lesson there around courage, right? Because it's not,
I think there's a lesson in that. I think there's also a lesson, and I think you're alluding to that at the start of that, in being able to paint the picture, right? So if you've got particularly institutional backers, they're going to want to understand what you're doing, right? They're not going to allow you to just spend their money, and so we really had to paint the picture of why that timing was right. And as much of that was done outside of the boardroom as was done in the boardroom, So I spent a lot of time, and evenings up in Brisbane, across in New Zealand, talking to board members, saying this is the way we want to operate, this is how we want to go. We think it's time, and to their credit, they backed me, and away we went.
So that was one of the big moments, that big push. Well, there was a second one, but I think I cut you off from alluding to.
Well, the second moment was then the cut back in the business.
Oh, right? Was the cut? Okay, was the right sizing?
Yeah, was the right sizing and leaning up the business. So we said, well, we've got to a level now where we're really comfortable, highly competitive, very hard to knock off. The financial crisis of 2008 had most people had some skin off, and we were saying, well, we need to right size the business at the same time. Our right sizing, as I said, was a lot more traumatic than if we'd built it brick by brick. And so that was in essence the great lesson, right? We saw the opportunity, we took it. At the end of it, it was traumatic, but we had an unbelievably good business, and we were running that business lean and mean. It was really it became a lean operating business.
One of the other things I hear in that, and because people can take out of that a lot of different things, right? They can be going, well, if I was thinking about deploying that kind of strategy, well, it basically means I need to understand my market super well and to be paying attention to competitors. I've got to be looking for those opportunities. But one of the things that you said really stuck out to me, which is we actually had our systems in a position that our systems were ready, because it's like you can see those opportunities and then you have to turn back and look at inside your business and go, have I got the team? Have I got the systems? Can we actually, if we were to go and deploy a whole bunch of money, are we just going to completely blow it up because we can't service anyone, the quality is going to be poor, systems will fail, etc. And it sounded like you had done the preparation work to have a business that was already prepared for scale before you then put the foot down.
And that was the picture that we had to paint for the board. We had to say to them, we're ready to go, and there will be some bumpy bits, right? So of course, again, you've got to have the as you said, the wherewithal to have a crack at it. But from a business perspective, if you can get your board there, I think it's one way to go. We've deployed a different strategy in the incubation business, and again, I'm happy to talk about that a little bit later. But we've deployed a different strategy in relation to the way that we look at things. But getting all of those things right, and like any business, you need a little bit of luck along the way. And there's nothing like a distracted set of shareholders to help you do that of your main competitor.
Absolutely. When you think back on that period, what do you feel like there were some mistakes, or if you'd had that time again? Obviously, some of these lessons might have come from what you're deploying now in the incubation business, which we'll come to. But when you think back on that time, if you'd had your time again, what do you wish somebody would have told you in 2004 that might have helped you along the journey?
Yeah, I think for me, like so many mistakes, hard to express them all. I think if I had to pick the biggest one, it's be a bit faster with having the wrong people in the organisation. So when you get into that situation where you just want to throw warm bodies at it because you got a lot of activity going on, you do make mistakes and you hang on, and that costs you over time. And so that probably, if I had my time,
hang on to people that probably shouldn't be there for that part of the journey.
Yeah, that just didn't want to be on the journey, were the wrong employee, weren't the right fit. We made a lot of excuses to ourselves in our own, internal management meetings and board meetings, saying, well, I just need people to do the job, instead of taking the pain of saying, look, it's not working out, let's move that person on, or let's have a conversation where we can move someone in who's more aligned with what we're doing. And that's certainly I think probably right up to 2014 when we sold the business. I was still paying a price for not doing things early enough, all the way through there. So
and it's hard.
Life. It's hard.
It's hard when you're growing fast.
Yeah, and it's also hard, Sean, when when you're the startup person, right? And people have been on the journey with you. And look, and that's, it's been all the way through, certainly, in the last 5 years where we've started 8 of our own startups, including our BRC parent business. When people are founders and they're on the way with you, gee, it's hard to have those tough conversations. But as the business grows and shifts, sometimes you've got to make those calls. And sometimes people just they're not ready for it, or they don't want to be on it. They want it to be like it was, and the businesses shift and move and change, and that's the reality of it.
I remember hearing somebody say that in their first meeting with every person they started with, and they must have heard it from somewhere, and it really helped them in their startup journey, is every likelihood this business is going to grow around you. And so, my job is to help you sort of fulfill your contribution at whatever level you can be at. But fundamentally, we're going to need people who are at the next stage. Every time we get to the next stage, we're going to need people who are at the next stage, which means it's pretty likely that the business is going to grow around you. But it doesn't mean that we can't find great ways for you to develop, professionally, personally, and so on. But,
well, that's a lovely way to put it.
Yeah.
So. I'll use that, Sean. Thank you. I'm on the learning journey too.
Yeah, that's right. So, Paul, you're thinking he's like, okay, the next conversation I just feel like this business is growing around you.
yeah. I've got about 8 people I've got to talk to like that, and in the next 7 days. Thanks, mate. Very grateful.
Much appreciated. Well, hopefully this won't have been published prior. So, what have you alluded to a piece there before, but what advice did you get, and from what sources that really mattered on that journey? Like, what kind of people did you have around you, and what advice did you get? Yeah,
so it took me a long time to get. So I had a really good board. Like that was sort of fundamental to it. I mean, I'd really experienced people that were knew when to be aggressive, knew when to pull back. And I listened to those guys. Probably not close enough to them when we started to get to a point, and that's a communication piece around what do you want now. And when you're growing aggressively, you don't want to hear pull back, right? And I probably ignored it for 12 months, and then it punched me in the face. But I think I had a great board at that time, and then I think once we'd gotten through the rationalization of the business, it was big, it was operating well. I then really my biggest mentor was a guy called John Ralph, and I talk about him a lot. John was the chairman of the Commonwealth Bank. He was he was the first sort of CEO of Rio Tinto, which was CRA in its day. I mean, the guy's a legend, wonderful human being. And, I had gotten through, that post change, period of great change. And someone said to me, you got to have a mentor. You got a lot of moving parts, and he introduced me to John. And John was just that sort of settling voice, that external settling voice, which you really need as the entrepreneur or the startup person. You need that. And I if I'd gone back and had my time again, when people ask me about what are the things, one is that sort of moving people on that aren't quite right for it, but also I think the get the grey hair in the room and sit down and listen. And while John was from a very corporate background, it was just that ability to be able to say, well, I've seen it all before, so let's have the conversation about it. And, because I would turn up and think, well, he's not going to know anything about what I'm doing. And, the guy merged 2 of the biggest companies in the world together, so it's probably not, hadn't seen at the time. And so for me, that was a wonderful part of the journey. So I think that's a must and a great way to eliminate a lot of the mistakes you make along the way.
Yeah, so true. And I know that one of the things that people really find challenging is if they don't already have these people in their network. Sometimes then the place to start is peer networks. So be that, subject to the size of the business, whether that's YPO or it's EO or it's Club of United Business or it's CEO connection. There's numerous organizations around. And I would say to anyone, if you don't have a good mentor, you immediately need to get yourself around at least peer mentors, because you will get some good hard-hitting advice from some, and you'll get introduced to others, and it will lead to other connections. super valuable. I guess,
And look, and I totally agree with you, Sean. I haven't seen a peer network that doesn't have within it a mentor structure that allows you to find those people. So I'm the same as you. I would encourage that from the get-go.
I remember hearing Mark Green on our podcast say, you really need to change or sort of elevate your neighbourhood, and that's a great way to do it, to make sure that if you walk into a room and you think, geez, I hope they don't ask me any hard questions because I'll be embarrassed to sort of tell them the truth, that's probably the room you should be in, because you're around some wise people,
That's right, exactly.
Feeling a bit undercooked.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I mean, I know there's heaps more we could talk about in the Direct Connect story, but take me to the incubator, because I know you're excited about this. You've put it together. You've started it 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, so I had a year off, did the Harvard AMP course, which was...
What's the AMP stand for, just so people know?
Advanced Management Program. So it's their sort of flagship CEO, COO global course. So they do a 2-year, at Harvard you either do a 2-year live-in MBA, or you do the AMP courses, and then there's a whole range of them, OPM and others. But the AMP course is the flagship one. So global CEOs, they attend that one. And at the time, I wasn't a global CEO, but I was someone who got through. John Ralph had been there in the 60s, so having his little recommendation helped. But what it was for me was where am I going on my journey? Is it going into CEO land and into larger organisations? Because I had enjoyed putting those two businesses together. I had enjoyed being right at the pointy end of the sale process, so that was enjoyable for me. But then it was so what's next? And within 2 weeks, I had said, okay, I want to go back to startup. That's really where I belong. And I'd had those conversations with all of the professors along the way, saying, well, what do you want to do with your life? And I think it goes back to the question of where's your mindset. And I got back to, I just want to be involved in purpose-driven businesses, and I don't want to retrofit those businesses. I want to see those businesses through from the outset. And so that's how we've managed, the BRC Capital business, which is the incubator and accelerator. That's how we've managed that from the get-go. We have been, if it's not a purpose-driven business, we're not interested in it, won't be involved in it. And so we've seen success right across our portfolio. We've taken the view that we're not going to invest in 8 because we want to get 1 or 2 over the line. We're going to invest in 8, and we're going to put our arms around them because we want 8 to survive, or 10 to survive, or 12 to survive and then thrive, whether it be with us or with the next stage of the journey. That's where we've gone. So we're really proud of the incubator. I mean, if we probably had, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 years ago, we'd started up 4 of them. We had about $3 million bucks of revenue. We're now at 180 mil.
Wow.
That's 3.5 years on. Bit of M&A, bit of start up and go. So I guess we've proven the theory. The bits that I've talked about, prior to where we got to with BRC. We've applied every single bit of the thinking and the way of operating that I got wrong over that 10-year period. So that investment's been huge for us.
So just explain the business model for BRC Capital and these organisations. Are you who's founding, who's seeding the ideas, who provides the capital, where do the entrepreneurs come from?
Yep. So we've seeded most of them. So we seeded the medical business. So the first business that I started when I came back from Harvard was an advanced manufacturing 3D printing business in personalised medical devices. So we have a competitor to Invisalign called Smile Styler. We have an orthopedic bracing business called Circle. We built our big capability on 3D machines for the next stage of the medical journey. So when the pandemic hit, we became the go-to for the government. Like they said, we've got a big facility that's operating. We've got scientists, researchers, R&D personnel in there, and we quickly, within the pandemic, we were building new filters for hazmat suits and parts for ventilators, and then we became more famous for our swab, which we designed with the Docherty Institute down here in Melbourne, and we became Australia's only COVID testing kit for PCR, gold standard. Right. So, we deployed that capability, and so I'm not finishing the answering the question very well, but I guess we started that business, and that's giving birth to a whole range of other businesses along the way, and we're putting CEOs in those businesses to run those businesses. So we still sit on top of it. We run the strategy. We control the capital, both in and out of the business. We've got some wonderful family offices that support us from an investment perspective. We've obviously made our own investments in this business, and I've got partners that sit around the table under the BRC banner. We're not a shared services business where we want to own HR and finance and other things, but most of the capital that's deployed from a finance perspective we'll have a pretty close eye on. And when entrepreneurs come in, they generally come through our own pathway, so our own business pathway. An example might be our Hood business, where Tom Fraser, who started the Direct Connect business alongside me, he started a platform called Hood, which is a moving market platform. It's a tech business. It's AI driven. It's a fantastic business. We've raised capital in the US. We've raised capital in Australia. He's now doing a similar thing to Direct Connect, except he's deploying his AI technology on top of that. And he's the entrepreneur in that business. And we sit and I sat with him this morning, and we said, okay, how's the strategy going? Where's the cash? What are we doing? So he gets to be able to come, and while it's not the mentoring side of things, it certainly is a safety net. And so we've got that business in the tech space. We've then got a large scale manufacturing, distribution and brand business, which manufactures all sorts of organic and sustainable soaps and hand creams and face creams and makeups and all sorts of things. A large one out at Dandenong. That's a business we've picked up with another distribution business, put it together. We call it the $100 million startup, and it's a business that we're rebuilding, taking back onto the ASX on May the 30th, and it's really exciting for us. It's deployed different capability within the BRC business, but we've shown our capability for seeing a deal, stepping back and looking at markets where we think the market's moving, and then deploying our assets to put things together to create liquidity for our investors.
Wow, mate, what an incredible journey. And you never thought you'd be an expert in so many new things, having built Direct Connect.
I can talk about plagiacephaly, and I can talk to you about raw materials that go into hand soaps, Sean. I've got a broad range.
Make you an interesting dinner table guest. So when you think about, you sort of take a step back and look at the Direct Connect journey, and you've been able to see this is obviously an entirely different business model. You've had some capital to start with. You've been able to raise other capital. You're putting these deals together. What are the things that you learned from the Direct Connect journey that you've been able to apply in this? What are the learnings that you've sort of really, things that you went in very consciously about?
Yeah, so I think when it's all your capital or people's capital that are coming in, not just as shareholders of business, but real genuine stakeholders in the overall BRC Capital business, we are much more cautious about the way that we deploy capital. So the way that we look at markets and then deploy slightly different from the Direct Connect, where we aggressively went hard, knowing that we'd have an outcome at a given point in time that was traumatic. We tried to avoid that in the way that we actually operate. Now it's not that we're saying that was wrong, but because it's a different way of deploying the capital and looking at market and market forces, we've really looked at, so if we take where we think medicine and personalised medical devices is going to be in 5 years and 10 years, that's the view that we've taken. When we talked about Direct Connect, it was taking market at that point in time for a point where there'd be delivery and liquidity. Now we say, so what does that 5 or 10 year journey look like? Because this is a purpose-driven business, we know that we want it to go on forever. We might not be the best owner of that business over time, but we're much more nurturing about the way that we go about it. And so that for me is a fundamental learning from where we were to where we are today, and it's helped us keep on board our CEOs and the really important people that sit around our organisation. I think the other thing is we've moved pretty quickly on just people that haven't gelled with it. Like we're a pretty fast-paced business. Some people it's just not up for that, and that's fine. Like that's not a criticism. It's just what it is. And so we're really conscious that we've got to take people on a journey. We've got to train them up. We've got to get them there, and then we've got to sort of cut them loose and hope that they get there. And so being a bit stronger about being upfront about how we're going to grow, it's going to grow around you. We've been a lot more like that. And I think probably the last thing is we've just been really brutal on ourselves around what is the purpose of all of this. Like, why are we doing this? What's the outcome? And if you look across the portfolio, sustainability and scale with organic sustainable products, I mean, that is just a must in our community and our society. Now, we've got a very large manufacturing distribution business that is its purpose in life, and we feel really proud of that, of what we're doing there, and we really feel like it's got a huge future. Same with the medical business. Getting better patient outcomes is nothing like that. And being the end manufacturer, where I've always been in a service model, has just been an absolute joy. And Tommy's business, Hood, it is connected here in Australia with Mission Australia, in the US, with a range of different partners that are really about assisting with homelessness. So he donates, for every move, he donates funds back to Mission Australia for their programs that are getting people not just a roof over their head, but getting them back implanted into society the right way. And so he funds one of those programs in there. And again, it's really important for us as a business to do that. And we are attracting a different type of person to our business because of that.
As a result, yeah. That's amazing. Well, I think I've spoken to that concept with numerous people over the last probably 10 or 15 podcasts, and that continues to come up and up and up. If you want to attract the best people can put their efforts anywhere. And in this day and age, people want to feel like they're contributing to something that means something, that's meaningful. That's right. You don't get the best people otherwise. Yeah. So, Paul, we're running short of time. Every founder that I've spoken to, I ask this question, which is called above all else. So I want you to imagine to go out now, you've started this incubator, it's going like a rocket, you've got all these different businesses that are being seeded, and there's going to be a whole bunch more that you'll be seeding, no doubt, in the future. But if you go all the way out to you're in your sort of yearning years, you've achieved everything that you wanted as a CEO, as a business leader, you get a phone call from the global CEO of the world's largest community of first-time founders, tens of millions of them around the world. They're super hungry in a big community, always looking for the best knowledge and ideas from the people who sort of made it in their eyes. And she gives you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to share your wisdom, but she asks you for your 3 above all else's. And she says, Paul, what are the 3 things that you must get right as a founder if you want to scale? What would your 3 above all else's be?
If you want to scale?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that and I've talked about 2 of these and maybe not the third. So the business or the enterprise that you're in has to be a purpose-driven business. Otherwise, it doesn't the scale becomes irrelevant. You have to be doing something that you love. I think the second thing for me is that you have to do a whole lot of research on it. You have to understand your market. Like, what is the marketplace that you exist in? What are you doing for? Now, I know it's connected to purpose, but you really have to understand that. You have to work really hard on that. And I'd say the third thing, and it's the simplest thing, is don't run out of cash. And it's an underrated part of what happens in founder world is, and we say it all the time, it's on all of our whiteboards, it's don't run out of cash. Because I know that if I've got that cash, and it sounds so simple, if I've got that there, then I've got options. The minute that the music stops, then I've got problems. So getting the mentor, doing all of the things that are attached to it, those are the things that will get you to a point where you can scale quickly. And, Pete Cleary, who we talked about before, he's got a wonderful story about M&A and the way that they did that. He would say the same thing. You had to have the capital to do that. Yeah. And that becomes the fundamental part of that journey of growth. And it's such a simple thing, but it's so fundamental to getting there.
100%. Love it, mate. Fantastic summary, and thank you so much, Paul. How do people get in touch with you, follow along with BRC and all these wonderful businesses that are being incubated there? How do they?
Yeah, so sort of LinkedIn, most of them will be on LinkedIn, some of them will be on Instagram, particularly Hood. Reach out any way you'd like. LinkedIn's probably the easiest way to do it. And, happy to have the chat and share my experiences and talk more about it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Paul Docherty. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed the show with Paul today. A couple of things before you go. If you've got value out of what you've heard from Paul today, then please leave a review for him, leave a review for us. Let us know what you think about the podcast and what you liked about this episode, what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. Really helps everybody. If you want to follow us on the socials, that's at ScaleUps Podcast on all your typical socials, or you can go to the website, ScaleUpsPodcast.com. You can drop your email there and we'll let you know when there's tools and things coming up from different guests and when new episodes are about to drop. But remember, you've heard a really fascinating story from Paul today, and I expect, Paul, even though I probably didn't push you on them, there are probably a whole bunch of stages along this journey where there's probably times you second guessed yourself as to whether you should keep going or whether there was an easier path maybe somewhere else. I don't think there's any founder.
My wife has the same questions, Sean.
Absolutely. And fundamentally, the only thing that can absolutely guarantee that you can't scale, even though there's no perfect set of ingredients for scaling, is the only thing that guarantees that you won't get there is giving up. And so you've got to stay unshakable in your faith that you're going to get there. You've got to remain infinitely flexible in your approach, but you've got to have that resilience. You've been listening to the ScaleUps podcast. I'm Sean Steele. Look forward to speaking with you again next week. Thank you so much, Paul.
Good on you, Sean. Thanks, mate.
Bye.
See ya.
G'day everyone, just a couple of quick things before you go. If you have questions that you'd love myself or an upcoming guest to tackle about challenges that you're facing in scaling your business, please just jump straight on the website, ScaleUpsPodcast.com. You can record your message straight from your mobile by hitting the button on the right-hand side of the page, or you can just email them the old-fashioned way, questions@ScaleUpsPodcast.com. And just a quick reminder, nothing we spoke about today constitutes financial or business advice. If you are considering making big decisions in your business, seek out a professional who can look at your situation in detail and make sure you're getting sound, personalised advice. Thanks for listening. Look forward to being back in your podcast feed next week.